Hey everybody, how are you? This is Jim from the Pain PT, and I want to continue our talk today about emotions and how they relate to chronic pain or the chronic ailments in the body, health-wise. And we're going to talk today about what I think is the biggest emotion or the number one emotion that people tend to repress, suppress, hold in, have a hard time feeling, have a hard time expressing to others. And what do you think that emotion is? Let's take a look at the three primary emotions that we associate to be what we call negative emotions. They're not negative, but we perceive them that way, and have some relationship to pain or to chronic health ailments. So those three emotions are what? They are fear slash anxiety, anger, and sadness slash grief, and a whole subset of other secondary emotions underneath each of those primary ones. So, out of fear, anger, and sadness, which one of those three do you think we typically have the hardest time expressing openly and freely? You probably know this answer. It's anger, right? It's frustration, it's irritation, aggravation. If you think about it, a lot of people I speak to and people I talk to, they're already anxious. They're already a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, a little bit afraid of their symptoms and doing things. So that's usually the first thing you see in people is that there's a level of anxiety. You also ask people, about sadness, and they're feeling a bit sad about their condition. They maybe cry, or they have some grief, or they have some disappointment. They feel a little bit hopeless, and they have a tendency to cry pretty easily. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. And then when I ask them about the other emotion, which is anger, I said, how do you deal with that? And almost everybody I speak to, without fail, has an issue with anger. And people either fall into two categories, I think. One is that they have never been a person to get angry, even from a young child. They've just hold things in. They're a really nice person. They never yell at anybody. They never show much anger or frustration outwardly. That's been a consistent theme for them. Or two, they're the type of person who used to get quite angry, used to get quite upset. Maybe they used to have a little temper tantrum, or they kind of scream or yell. And they decided to stop doing that because they were looking at it wasn't working for them, or they were getting older and they didn't want to do that with their families and their spouses' work. So they decided to start to hold anger back. And as you know, when we do that, what happens? What physical symptoms tend to rise up? Now, anger is probably the biggest emotion associated with pain and with somatic complaints outside of anxiety. And, Dr. Sarno's whole premise in all of his books was about repressed anger, repressed rage. And it makes sense. You know, Anxiety is something that we talk about. We're nervous. We say, we're a little bit tentative. We feel a little bit scared around things. And it's appropriate to be nervous. It's appropriate to be a bit anxious. And, when we're really sad, we might cry. We might do that amongst friends or family or in our own space. But with anger, the biological, physiological pathway of anger is to come up out the throat and mouth in the form of screaming, yelling, shouting. And the energy also goes down the arms into the hands to make fists for fighting. Okay? So if you think about it, anger is one of these emotions that is not going to be accepted very well if you're screaming and yelling and shouting, uh, losing your temper, if you're fighting, punching holes in the wall, causing fights. It's not going to go over well, right? So it's one of these emotions we have learned, usually from a young age. Either one of our parents may have been people who did never get angry, never showed anger, or basically told you not to be angry, go to your room, don't express anger, get in trouble. and you're helpless as a child. You're not empowered, so you basically listen to your parents. Or one of your parents was an angry parent who typically um, got frustrated easily, blew their top, maybe yelled and screamed a lot, or even went further with some type of emotional or physical abuse. So we can see anger in a lot of family dynamics, and that translates into the current sort of engagement model or emotion regulation model we have around anger. Now, anger is the same as any other emotion. I want to make that clear. So it's no different than fear, it's no different than sadness, no different than joy and happiness. It's on the same exact shelf. So we want to be able to engage anger. We want to be able to feel it in the body, be able to express it freely in a healthy way, and use it to our advantage to heal. Because a lot of people I see, they're doing grief work, maybe around lost loved ones or things that they feel like is a loss to them, but they're still having pain. And they're working on their anxiety and they're working on their fear and trying to reduce that. And a lot of people do. And in those cases, some people can reduce their pain and be pain-free. But a lot of them, they reduce anxiety a little bit, reduce fear, but they're still left with pain. They're still left with symptoms. And anger is this emotion right in the center. It's like the peanut butter and jelly between two pieces of bread. You got fear, anxiety on the front end. You got sadness on the back end. And it gets sort of caught between the two other emotions, and it doesn't get the recognition it really deserves. So if you think about your pain, you think about your physical condition, how do you describe it? What words do you use to describe your pain, your physical symptoms? When I'm talking to people, a lot of times I hear them use the word of anger in their description of their symptoms. People say, yeah, it feels inflamed. It's definitely got some inflammation in it. Yeah, it's sort of a burning feeling. Yeah, it feels like it's aggravated. It's irritated. These are words that describe the emotion of anger. And a lot of times people don't realize they're actually describing the emotion they feel inside them, and that their physical symptoms are a representation of anger. And that if they can get in touch with the emotion instead of just the physical sensory symptom, this can help the chronic pain and chronic symptoms to go away, because we're actually getting in touch with the actual emotion now as an emotion, not as a physical symptom, which is what we want to do. We want to get, let's say, anger in the correct pathway so we can feel it as anger. And so there's a part of everybody, if you're having pain, unless you're a masochist, that you're not going to like your pain. How many of you like your pain, like your symptoms? I don't think you do. And if you don't, that means part of you hates that. Part of you is frustrated you have these symptoms. Part of you is irritated, maybe aggravated, maybe even going further. Part of you is enraged. Part of you is just fed up with these symptoms. What do you do with that? What do you do with the anger part of you that is at the end of the line around these symptoms? Do you address it? Do you feel it? Do you release it? Do you express it? Or do you hold it in? Do you keep it to your side or push it away? A lot of people I talk to say, oh, I shouldn't feel that way, or I should do this, or no, I'm not gonna address that. I don't want to feel that way. So these are ways of sort of defense mechanisms to avoid the feeling of anger. And when we have anxiety, a lot of times, which is fear, that actually acts as a shield to prevent us from feeling the next emotion, which is anger. So we want to try to get to this core emotion of anger a lot of times with pain. And the other thing we see, if we're not feeling anxiety or fear, which blocks us from feeling anger, we have guilt. Guilt's a family of sadness again on the back end. Like I said, we have these two pieces of bread between the peanut butter and jelly, which is the anger, anxiety, Fear stops us from feeling anger. And then we also have this guilt, okay, about being angry. Maybe it's about a loved one. Maybe it's about a spouse, a parent, a child, somebody you're close with. And when we have these mixed feelings, what happens to anger is it gets suppressed, it gets repressed, it gets buried beneath the guilt because we don't feel like we should have those feelings towards somebody. But that's basically suppression or repression, and then anger gets circulated through your system as pain. And we have research showing that now, that when you can't be open to express anger as a facial expression or to have some expression of it, when they ask participants to suppress their anger and then they do a pain provocation test later, those people who suppressed their anger had way higher pain scores hours later, even a day later, than people who were allowed to emote and express anger. We also have another study that showed when you displayed the wrong emotion, let's say somebody was annoying you in the study, which they did, and people were displaying fear instead of anger, which was the correct emotion they should have been displaying, they also had elevated stress cortisol levels that stayed active in the system. The people who actually showed some sort of frustration or form of anger expression, their levels dropped much quicker. The cortisol dropped, their stress hormones dropped in a much more quicker fashion because they were expressing the correct emotion. Now think about anger. It gets such a bad rap. It gets a bad rap in the science. People saying don't get angry, you're going to raise your blood pressure. Don't, you're going to get in trouble. You can't go to work and scream at your boss. You don't want to punch a hole in your wall. You don't want to yell at your child. But you have this emotion in you, we all do. And when it gets triggered, if it gets triggered in you, you want to honor it. You don't want to suppress or repress it because this is what can contribute to cause and exacerbate pain and can lead to chronic pain. So I really want you guys to try to get in touch with this emotion of anger and maybe make a list of all the things you're angry about or angry with, people you're angry with, situations you're angry with. Maybe look at times around your pain, when pain started, your condition started, what was going on, and see if you can make some links there between this anger and your pain. We'll talk more about this in another video of different ways you can address the emotion of anger in a very healthy way instead of in a destructive way. All right, everybody, I'll talk to you guys soon. We'll do another video about this emotion of anger, and hope you guys have a great day.